Express Christian Calgie and political journalist Katrina Stewart. Welcome to both of you. Lovely to see you this morning. We're going to kick off with the Sunday Times main splash, and this in the aftermath of a week of outrage about a leak of information regarding people applying from Afghanistan to come to the UK after helping out British forces. News of another leak, says the Sunday Times.
It's astonishing, isn't it? So the Army has launched an investigation after the identities of, I think, dozens of SAS personnel were published online. The Defence Secretary is said to be furious about this latest major error. And, of course, it comes shortly after we learned that members of the SAS and MI6 spies were included in the major Afghanistan leak a number of years ago. And it seems to, this latest leak seems to have come about because of an in-house publication included a roll call of names and deployments of its most senior officers. And it reopens all sorts of questions about competence within the army, about what our enemies know, about data handling across government. And I just think, once again, it shakes our confidence in the whole system.
Well, yes, I mean, that's right, isn't it? I mean, the sense that if information like this could fall into the wrong hands, it could be very dangerous for people who are already doing a very dangerous job.
Yes, exactly. And what's astonishing is that it was an in-house magazine that was publishing this. Up until very recently, the latest edition was last year, and we're talking about highly confidential information that could really literally put lives at risk, available just by Googling it. This information is freely available online. There are code names being used, but the shorthand is very easy to work out. It's just acronyms. And you are able just to look this up on the internet.
And it also seems one of the more shocking elements of this is that the Sunday Times previously ran a version of this story without specifying that they were SAS soldiers. And it seems like the Ministry of Defence didn't take action to get the names removed until they went, the Sunday Times went for a second time to say, we're going to say that they're members of the SAS. And they were finally deleted, I think, this Friday. And at least 20 members of the top secret service were named for more than a decade online. Utterly astonishing.
Well, yeah, I mean, where do you think this goes, Katrina? Because there's obviously the huge fallout regarding all the people, 19,000 people and their families applying to come to the UK. There's the fallout from that. As you say, later in the week, the super injunction was lifted on that other piece of information that about 100 Britons were also included, including Special Forces fighters. Where does this story go now?
Well, it remains to be seen what else might come out here, because as Christian says, it's really hard to have confidence that other information is being kept confidential, that correct processes are being followed in securing this information. There are calls for serious reviews, and I think that is what has to happen next. There needs to be a root and branch look at how information is being handled, because this is enormously risky for everybody who's involved.
I think it's symbolic of wider problems with the British state. It just seems so, understaffed, over-exhausted, sort of crippled in so many key areas. And actually, I think, again, it's symbolic of just wider problems, that everything's underfunded, overstressed, all in need of a serious top-to-bottom root and branch reform and improvement. And I don't think, this is going to be standalone. I think everything from how the NHS is run to the civil service to the defence industry, Britain just seems exhausted, doesn't it?
And it highlights the problems that Labour faces. I mean, there is a huge task ahead of Keir Starmer and the Labour government in tackling all of these different issues. And it feels that every day, this government does not have its troubles to seek, but it is an enormous piece of work, and it remains to be seen whether Keir Starmer can persuade the British public to come along with him while he tries to reform everything that has to be reformed.
Without very much money.
Yes.
Indeed. OK, let's move on to the Telegraph. They have a story on their front page, not their main story, but it's at the right-hand column there, talking about Rachel Reeves perhaps getting a windfall via Bitcoin. So how does this work?
This makes me feel very old because I am
Try being me. I mean, I actually am.
I'm still in the position that Bitcoin's not a real thing. And of course it is. Of course it is. But, you know, we literally just mentioned all the problems facing Labour, and one of them is not having very much money. So in an attempt to boost the public coffers, the Home Office is working with police forces to sell off Bitcoin that has been taken as part of proceeds of crime. And I think we've all heard of proceeds of crime and we think of it as being tangible assets that are removed from criminals. But Bitcoin apparently is being used to evade financial controls. It's being used as financial scams. And the government is going to confiscate this and apparently could make as much as £5 billion. It's been described as oil underneath our feet that the government should be making the most of. So there is a bit of a problem because some of this money was taken in 2018 from a raid on Chinese assets and they're asking for it back. So it's potentially not straightforward, but could be quite a lucrative earner.
Well, yeah, does it sound like a sort of canny move, this?
I don't think so, actually. Mainly because it would almost, I think, be for Rachel Reeves what selling the gold was for Gordon Brown. I don't see any indication that Bitcoin, the value of it, is set to fall. If anything, it's continually rising. And whilst it may be a short-term solution to Rachel Reeves' problems, I can very much imagine in 5 years or so, if Bitcoin continues its meteoric rise, that Rachel Reeves will be completely condemned for selling such a huge amount of wealth at a market level that would then prove quite low. The problems, of course, of Rachel Reeves, I would argue, are of her own making. So to be, you know, basically...
Not totally of her own making.
Largely. I mean, she told us last year, of course, that she'd fixed the foundations, that it was a one-off set of tax rises, and now, because of various U-turns and growth has been paltry for all sorts of reasons, she's now having to scrabble down the back of the proverbial sofa and is looking at sort of selling the family silver for short-term fundraising, and I think that's you know, unconscionable.
OK, thank you for using analogies that we can relate to. Family, actual objects, so you can get that. Bitcoin is it's harder to get your head around sometimes,
Yes.
isn't it? Take us, Christian, to the front of the Mail on Sunday. They have a story here about the government's national security advisor.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Jonathan Powell, who was one of the most senior figures in Tony Blair's government and made a triumphant comeback as Keir Starmer's national security advisor, was using a company that he led called Intermediate to basically be a private diplomatic channel with some quite questionable people, including terrorist groups.
But there's nothing wrong with them doing that.
No, I mean, they were funded by the Foreign Office
to create
to have channels, especially with the sort of the Syria group that took control following the fall of President Assad last year. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong at all here with what he was doing with this company, but it raises a number of questions, not least of which, why is the Foreign Office having to rely on private companies for diplomatic channels? Why is it outsourcing this very important role? And what, you know, how did Jonathan Powell, for example, get in touch with these questionable individuals? And what were the back channels and how were the relationships created? And are there any ongoing relationships between Jonathan Powell and individuals?
He has stepped down from his role in the...
He has now. He
took on this role.
He has, but all of these questions would be well answered with a parliamentary committee hearing. And the MPs have been asking for the last year to scrutinise Jonathan Powell, not least because of the very important role he had in the Chagos handover deal. But he is refusing to appear because this government basically gave the National Security Advisor a position, a technical position, which means he doesn't have to appear, unlike a number of the previous national security advisors under the Conservative government. And it's another element to which I think he needs to appear before Parliament and answer a lot of crucial questions. And I think it's completely wrong for this government to be refusing to allow him to appear.
OK, so it's an issue of transparency is basically the one here, not necessarily anything to do with what that body does. Let's move on to the Sunday Telegraph. Katrina, a story here about pupils being taught about what constitutes a mental health issue and what is the normal kind of ups and downs of growing up.
Yes, this is Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary's response to a crisis in young people not being in work or training once they leave school. And mental health is a huge issue for this generation, particularly post-pandemic. And I think there hasn't been enough sort of mental health supports around that. But pupils are now being told there's new guidance that's going to be in schools saying that feeling down is not a mental health issue. And there has been criticism that there has been pathologising of just normal human emotions. You're not sad anymore, you're depressed, you're not angry, you have some kind of mental health problem. So pupils are now going to be told that, I think, moderation in all things. And it's an attempt to ensure that young people are not going off sick, that they are engaging in work and trying to tackle joblessness among young people.
Do you think that makes sense? Do you think that sounds like a sort of practical, pragmatic approach, or do you think it risks dismissing bigger problems that children might be going through?
I think it has to be handled very carefully. I mean, there is a huge problem with mental health waiting lists for young people. There are massive knock-on effects of the pandemic that aren't being dealt with properly. I sit on the children's panel, which is a thing that you don't have in England, but in Scotland we deal with young people in a voluntary system called the Children's Hearing System. And I see a lot of young people who otherwise wouldn't have fallen out of school but have just been massively damaged by the pandemic, who have ongoing mental health problems, and there just are not enough supports in place.
Yeah, sadly, it's a big subject. We haven't got any more time to discuss it. Apologies, Christian, for not coming back to you on that. But you are back in the next hour, so we can always revisit it then if necessary. Thanks very much indeed for now.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland.